Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a privilege to be speaking here today, and especially alongside my dear friend, Mohsen. We are gathering in really strange days after 2 years of systematic annihilation of civilian population, of starving helpless children to death, of a genocide taking place in live broadcast before the eyes of the world. We cling to the hope that perhaps at last this horror is coming to an end. Not because we have any faith in the purity of intent of the two criminals who hatched this agreement. Both belong on the benches of The Hague, but because hope is one of the essential tools in the toolbox of our struggle. When I was preparing my remarks for this conference, I planned to describe the components of the genocide as analyzed in depth in B'Tselem's report, Our Genocide. But then I changed my mind. After all, the audience in this room knows full well the nature of the crimes that Israel has been committing in Gaza, and details can be read in the reports by B'Tselem and by other Palestinian and international organizations. Instead, I want to say a few words about soul-searching and about political imagination. Because sooner or later, the genocide in Gaza will end, and only then will we begin to digest the full dimensions of the catastrophe that Israel brought upon the Strip. We must begin to prepare for that day and for what it will demand of all of us. The day after will demand a thorough soul-searching from many, first and foremost from us, the Israeli Jewish public. We will need to examine in depth all the processes of dehumanization of Palestinians for decades, and be accountable for the racism, the racial laws, the land theft, the ethnical cleansing, the indiscriminate killing, the siege, the humiliation, the cultural erasure, and so much more. No new reality will ever be possible without this reckoning and without the criminals both brought to justice and punished. But the governments around the world will also have to be held accountable for how they allowed Israel to establish over decades a clear apartheid regime and still call it a democracy. For how they supported Israel's unimaginable violence over the years, armed it, and kept calling Israel a democracy. And how they continue even now to ignore the institutionalized everyday violence against Palestinians in the West Bank and the systematic racist discrimination against the Palestinian citizens of Israel. The blood of the genocide victims in Gaza is also on their hands. Yet, the day after will also demand of us a different kind of political imagination, freer, braver, to refuse the colonial dictates that seek to force us a twisted understanding of reality in service of their corrupted interest. We can ask, for example, why is it that the dominant political discourse in the West today takes for granted that the Israeli-American demand that Hamas will not be a part of any future agreement in Gaza, yet does not even think to demand the same regarding Netanyahu and his blood-soaked government? How is it possible that we don't hear a clear international demand to condition any future agreement on the removal from power of every member of this criminal government of genocide and bringing Netanyahu before the International Criminal Court? is it even conceivable that regime that carried out a genocide would continue to be legitimate? Another example of the importance of political imagination can be given in the context of the recent recognition by several countries of the State of Palestine. After 2 years of annihilation, the idea that such a symbolic act with almost no real meaning would be considered a sufficient act is an insult and a shameful attempt to limit our political imagination. We cannot accept that. All of those states have far more effective tools to stop Israeli machine of destruction. We demand that those tools will be used. The bold and effective political imagination refuses to submit to the dividing lines that those with vested interests seek to draw for us. One of the things that most frightens the Israeli apartheid regime is crossing the lines that separate the two peoples who live on this land. Therefore, we must define more accurately the dividing lines. Not Jews versus Palestinians, but supporters of freedom and equality versus oppressors, supremacists, racists, colonialists. It is a struggle between those who build walls and those who tear the walls down. Regrettably, and I see it very sincerely, the number of such people in Jewish Israeli society is still very small. You know, in Israel, nationalist, militarist brainwashing begins right in the delivery room. So that when those young people reach the age of 18 and are legally required to enlist in the army, only very few of them are free enough in their minds to be able to resist. But as a long-time political activist, I know for certain that change is possible and that we do not have the privilege to not fighting for it. In the end, and I will conclude with this, in the end, the genocide in Gaza will end. But in many ways, our work will only begin the day after, to dismantle the Israeli apartheid regime and establish in its place a space for equality, for dignity and liberty for all the inhabitants of this land. Our weapons in this struggle in this ongoing struggle will be our moral high ground, our courage, our political imagination, our determination, and our solidarity. It will be a difficult task, but we do not have the privilege of failing for the sake of the generations to come, Palestinians and Jews alike. Thank you very much.